Hello, YouTube. Welcome to Bottom of the Smash Mountain, a podcast focused around Melee, hosted by Jesse Wall, a.k.a. Cypher, a.k.a. me. That's me talking. Yes, that's right. I am the host of this whole thing, and I am the one who is trying to upload all the interviews I've ever done on my podcast onto YouTube. I am aware of how much access YouTube may or may not provide. Hopefully a lot for those of you who are more YouTube-focused platform users. Maybe you don't like listening to podcasts on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Podcast Addict or Podbean or many of the other podcasting platforms. There's apparently more than just 3. The point is that if you don't want to listen to a podcast but you want to watch a video of a picture, maybe have it in a separate tab while you continue to browse the internet, now you can do it through YouTube. So hope you continue to listen, and thanks for watching. Here we are, bottom of the Smash Mountain, and today I'm so happy to be joined by VentusOfficial marketing extraordinaire. Ventus, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I didn't know I was a marketing extraordinaire, but I'll take it.
You have dabbled, as they say, and you do support a couple of other Melee content creators in that realm of saying, how can we make you go far and wide throughout the internet? So I know a little bit about that, but I'm excited to learn more as you feel comfortable sharing, of course. I think the best place to start, though, is a little bit more towards the beginning. If you don't mind, what was it about Melee or another sort of maybe perhaps marketing? You can pick Melee or marketing. How about that? Which one you want to talk about, and just talk about when that became more meaningful to you at the beginning?
I think marketing, YouTube marketing or content marketing, is an easier place to start, because I feel like by the time I got to Melee is really when the ball was like actually rolling. So I guess to start it off, I got really more into marketing because first, VentusOfficial, my name actually comes because I used to own a clothing brand with my friend Walt, and I would do the marketing for it. So I just like really learned a lot about marketing in that time. I was like 18 or 19. And also I'm that type of person who would always love to share YouTube videos with people. Like I was the super sharer, they call it back in the days, where there are like stats. Some people would share videos like once or twice, but most shares from videos would come from one person multiple times. And I was that one person who would share a video to like everybody I knew and be like, oh my gosh, check this out. Isn't it awesome? And then through that, I just got better at figuring out, ironically, like both of those things separately. I just got better at figuring out like, oh, this is how to like make a video sound appealing to people. This is what I like about a video. This is how to like make it sound good to different types of people. Because at the time, I just really wanted to show people what I really liked about videos and like share that experience with other people. And then that just ended up leading me to marketing on YouTube.
Very cool. Let's talk about a few videos over the years that especially stand out to you, that you not only super shared, but maybe platinum shared or super duper shared. How about that? The one video that comes to mind for me, this is a bit of a pull, but I think you would remember this since you were an internet native at the time. The Susan Boyle audition on Britain's Got Talent. Do you remember sharing the crap out of that video?
I do. Also, the dancing crew, the dance team that won that season.
They did win. I remember their audition as well.
Yeah, that was definitely... that actually is definitely one that I super shared, just because I thought it was so cool. Other ones, I guess Brian Regan's early comedy days, like with stick figure videos.
I didn't know that he did those. The Brian Regan sketch that I remember was the spelling bee, and somebody superimposed the audio from that onto video footage from The Lion King, where Brian Regan's doing the spelling bee thing. The teacher was Scar. He's young Simba. It was hilarious.
Oh, I haven't seen that one. Actually, can you send that to me after this is over?
I'd be surprised if it were on YouTube at this point still. You know how that copyright thing works. They just go backwards and search into like the early 2010s and go, this is the no fun league now. Get that video out of here. But I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah, definitely the Brian Regan bits. Recently, Core 8 gaming videos. Obviously, people who I'm associated with, but that's kind of unfair because I'm associated with them. Core 8 gaming documentaries. The last one that I did was Why You Should Play Fighting Games. It's by Cosmic Variety Hour, I think. It's just this guy who does videos about things that he really enjoys, and usually if it's content like this is really cool and this is like why it's really cool, I love that type of content. Even if I'm not interested in it, I just like seeing, oh, this is why this person thinks it's so cool, and then it kind of like rubs off on me and I get super excited about it.
Okay, so I think I may have actually found the original video. It's 13 years old. It's 13 years old. Whoo! So I'm pretty sure that is the right one. So Lion King mixed with Brian Regan comedy. You love to see it. Another thing that I'm thinking of right now that we can talk a little bit about as much as you want to. Are you familiar with the Emperor Lemon documentary about HBox?
Yes, I am.
Are you also aware of the fact that that video has over 4 million views? It's like 4.6.
I think I saw it when I was at like 3, but yeah, I'm aware it popped off.
Exactly, and I think there are a few reasons for this. Do you want me to take a stab at it first and then you can infuse your expertise onto it, or would you like to take a shot at it first?
Actually, I do want to hear what your opinions are.
Okay, so the big thing is, and I discovered this afterwards because that was the first Amp Lemon video that I watched, but when you go, hey, this is a really awesome video, I wonder if there's more content like this, when you're really interested in a new YouTuber that you find. In Amp Lemon's case, I saw, okay, this is in a series of there will never ever be X, Y, Z. And there was, the first one was there will never ever be another show like SpongeBob, that kind of thing. So I said, okay, there's history and there's crossover. So he'd be pulling fans, either the casual or the super fans of a particular fandom, of a particular show or subject, interest, hobby, whatever. Also did one about Dale Earnhardt, and that was a very compelling story. All of a sudden, I thought I was a NASCAR fan for about 30 minutes after that video was done, after I was done watching that. And so I thought, okay, so there's the crossover thing by the time he gets to the video about Hungrybox, which is a full-blown documentary. It's almost an hour and a half, hour and 45, somewhere in there. So I think part of that is the fact that Amp Lemon had been multi-dipping or going into different sections of the internet. But it also has to do with how that video was very sneakily and maybe you would think that it wasn't sneaky so much as really loud and in your face, but it was also a compelling video about Hungrybox as a player, Jigglypuff as a character, and Melee as a culture and a game and a community. It was providing commentary on how people perceive players, characters, the sick list, the tier list, and most importantly, Hungrybox being in the center of it all, saying, here's Hungrybox's story, and here's why you should care about it. At the very end of the video, tying all the themes that he sort of underwrote into each section of the documentary, but putting it all together to the end, if you were paying attention the whole time, you'd be going, whoa, whoa, because that's what I did the first time I saw it. I was very interested in watching it, so I was kind of paying attention, as you would hope one does, but it doesn't always happen. And I'm hearing all these things coming together that I had been hearing and watching for the past hour and going, wow, that's a lot of connections, and just a smidge of controversy as well. Controversy will drive just about anything, as you know. So those are my thoughts.
I 100% agree with everything you just said. Other things, I think there will never ever be, like, that as a series, as a title, is super strong in the sense of it kind of, even if you haven't heard of Melee or whatever the topic is, it kind of gives you FOMO of not watching it. Like, oh, if there's never going to be another player like HBox, it's like, I want to know who this person is. Like, I want to be in the know. So you kind of get fear of missing out on not knowing. So I think the title in itself is super strong, in the sense of it's catered towards, like what you were saying, an inside and outside audience. If you're in the know, you kind of like want to hear it. And if you're not in the know, you're like, I want to be in the know now. So just title wise, I think it's super strong. Obviously the body of work is super important. And like you said, just looking at the channel, there's a lot of variety-esque content in that vein. Like I also saw the YouTube thumbnail metagame. Obviously that's targeted towards me, but I thought that one was like super interesting. All the videos are really high quality, and just in terms of structuring, I think that I haven't seen it in a long time, but the way that you structure a video is based on, you not only do you have to have like a good title and thumbnail and all that and like decent content, but how the content is structured is also kind of how your audience is going to, it matters, like that it's catered towards that audience. So like my golden rule that I always say is like, tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them, and then remind them at the end what you told them. And so then at the end, it's kind of like what you were saying, where you're like, oh, you see all these connections. It kind of makes that video like, oh, wow, I did learn a lot. That kind of like effect on someone. But that's more of a personal structuring thing for me mentally, and less of like, I'm not going to say like that's the only way to do it. I just think that for that kind of audience, that kind of structuring, I think goes super well. And I think that he's really good at seamlessly structuring a video.
Yeah, so good for Emp Lemon. But you also said something that my mom says, actually, especially when we were all homeschooled as kids. She would be helping us write essays, type out essays. I was in the typing gang for sure. But she would say to me, if you're writing a research paper, you need to tell me what you're going to tell me it, and then tell me again at the end. I'm like, this seems like a lot of telling people stuff, and I don't know how I feel about it. But she's like, it's a research paper. You need to give someone a reason to read this aside from spouting a bunch of facts. You need to spin a little bit of a narrative and make it compelling. Like, why? And for the record, my mom is a fantastic teacher. Those are the sort of things that make me look back and go, oh, okay, so that actually was very helpful and made it more fun to write, because I had another reason to do it aside from the fact that it was schoolwork. It was also to prove a point. So that is very interesting that you said that yourself. So I think we can move past the Hungrybox video and then talk about maybe perhaps another video that's been on your mind more recently, because like you said, you would have seen the Hungrybox doc a while back. So you named a couple of things earlier. You could either talk about one of those videos in a little bit more detail and maybe offer your opinions on it, or you can pick any recent video that you've seen.
Okay, I'm definitely going to go with the Cosmic Variety Hour, why you should play fighting games. Let me make sure that's the actual title. Yes, why you should play fighting games and how. I will send this to you,
yes,
just so you know.
Yeah,
but
I'll put it on the watch later list.
Yeah, it's on the Cosmic Variety Hour. It has like 1.5 million views, and it's basically going through this story of how the guy who has the channel, how he got into fighting games, why it was interesting to him. Like he introed it with basically, hey, I wasn't super into fighting games. I thought fighting games were not for me. So that way, anyone who's not into fighting games is kind of like, oh, I can relate to that. So if I want to send that to my friends who don't play fighting games, which I do, it kind of makes it so it's like, okay, he's kind of validating how I feel right now. And then he goes into how he started to fall in love with fighting games and why. And then also just the journey of like, oh, I saw my first tournament and I saw people doing things with a character that I'd never seen before. And it's not that they were hard. I just didn't even know those things existed. And then he goes to like the narratives that are formed in fighting games and like being in part of the community. And he basically just does a really beautiful job explaining. One, he says straight up, like, these are the arguments people have about why they don't want to get into fighting games, and I'll address them. And also just his journey of like, hey, I didn't think I'd be into fighting games either, and now I love them, and this is why. So hopefully I can do that for you today. And he just has some like really beautiful examples. It's actually really funny. He said fighting games aren't that hard, and then he's like, except for Melee. Melee is an exception. Melee is actually really hard.
Well, he's not wrong. This actually makes me think about Melee in general when you're talking about fighting games, because that's what I immediately relate to first. But I'm trying to think along the lines of how commentators present Melee to the Twitch masses. As you know, people who go and watch Melee on Twitch, more often than not, are definitely trying to find Melee on Twitch and watch it, and have seen tournaments before, have done all that stuff, and what will amount to maybe perhaps 10,000 viewers. But when there are 50,000 viewers, when there are 100,000 viewers, chances are a lot of that has to do with maybe perhaps Ludwig in the online era. Whenever Ludwig has a tournament on stream, that just automatically boosts it up by 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 views, or concurrent viewers across all the places that the tournament in question is being streamed. And so then the commentators have a really big job of how to present Melee, and you can't always, in every single set, every single game, and every single stock, talk about, now some of you may be watching this and may be thinking, I don't really understand what's happening here. Well, you see, when the character flies off the stage, you can't do that. But there are some people, and oh, this is going to be fun. There are some people who say, yeah, I want the commentators to know what they're actually talking about and get into the specifics of the game as the game is happening. And then there are other people who are like, I just love jokes. Duh. And I sort of fall in the middle. I'm not usually the kind of person to be super strong into one camp in the realm of Melee. I feel like I'm opinionated in other spots of my life, but in Melee, I like to see a balance of both. So with commentary, and this is diverting off of YouTube marketing, but in commentary, in your estimation, what do you think is the best balance presenting the game to people who are watching it as it's streamed live?
Honestly, this is going to be like probably a more mild take, but I really think that's more tournament dependent than it is a general rule. So there might be smaller tournaments or more niche tournaments that I think should be more catered towards diehard fans, like people who are watching it, who are already interested in Melee, and want more like grainy, in-depth details, I guess would be the right word. Like, instead of trying to get an audience at the beginning of the funnel, you're already trying to like, they already exist. But if you're talking about like an Evo or a tournament like on a bigger scale where you know there are going to be newcomers watching, then I think that it should be more catered towards an overall audience. That's just towards like who it's catering. In terms of like actual commentary style, I think that's really tough. Like, I think it really depends on the commentary duo and what they do well and what they don't. And also, like, there are probably people who can explain things, like get into the nitty gritty. Let's say they already have a professional play and they can explain really in-depth concepts. That's great if they can explain it. But sometimes knowing in-depth concepts doesn't necessarily translate to be able to communicate that to an audience who doesn't know that. So I think it's really commentator dependent and like commentator duo dependent. I don't really think there is a black and white, like all like one size fits all answer. And I think that's kind of like the cool part about having different commentator duos and different commentators, is that everybody brings their own thing. And then hopefully I really feel like that's more on the TOs to decide what type of style they want for the event, and less for the overall community, unless the overall community is like way too heavy on one side.
Sure. If there were, for example, a commentator who was popular with a small but influential group, and then there's this really loud and slightly less influential group who are going, get this person out of here, or what have you. But I don't think it's necessarily that in Melee. But now that makes me think about, by the way, good response. I'm with you on what you're saying. Now I think about in the bigger online events, and we're obviously talking about SCL, Summit Champions League. That is the big event of Melee online tournaments. They have a fairly consistent group of people who commentate those games and those sets. So I think that answers the question that I have. But for smaller tournaments that maybe occasionally cycle commentators in and out, do you think that is a good thing for the diehards who are tuning in to have a different voice that they hear? That's enough variety for them? Or do you like the idea of even smaller tournaments aiming to have the same people over and over again? Because those events are a thing. But I also think that there's some smaller-ish Melee events that do cycle in different people in and out.
I think it depends. Like, Walt was commentating a tournament a few weeks ago that I was tuning into because Walt's in it.
Let's go, Walt, front of the program.
Yeah. And so, I like to check. I like to watch things that people I work with are participating in. And it was such an interesting commentator task. So it was a local tournament that moved to online play. So the commentators were locals, like they were the people who were commentating in the local tournaments, I guess. And it was so casual, but it was so much fun. It was one of the most entertaining tournament streams I've ever seen. Also, like the sets were kind of crazy too, but like people were drinking. It was like there was inside jokes and like people were just kind of like joking around. And it felt so cool. And it clearly, like, these were people that obviously, like, they took their local tournament and then just transferred it online. But they were, like, so comfortable and so laid back that as a viewer, I'd never really seen that commentating style before. And I was just, like, interested to watch just off of, like, the banter from the commentators. Like, it just felt really cool. And I think they do use the same set of commentators every time, besides getting some guest commentators, like Walt was a guest that time. But I thought it was super cool. And if I can find the name of that tournament series, I'll send it to you. But that was kind of an example of like, wow, I'd never seen such like casual laid back commentary. And it be so like, I didn't learn anything really about Melee that much, but it was so entertaining to watch just all this stuff go on. I don't know if that answers your question, but
I think it does. No, I like the direction that you went with it. So how much interest do you have in learning more things about Melee? Or would you say that in terms of what you're trying to do with your life, that you know just about everything you need to about Melee, the game itself, and not necessarily need to understand any more advanced tactics or really advanced parts of the game? Because you know what wave dashing is, but do you say to yourself, oh, I want to learn more about Melee? Or do you say, I'll pick it up eventually and I'm not in a hurry to do it?
I want to learn more about Melee, and I am, because I have started playing Melee, so... Ooh. Just for my own sake. Yeah, I started playing a few months ago. So, and it is definitely like I definitely am glad I did it. Just I was surrounded by melee, so I felt like I really had no choice. I'm like, all right, I have to play this game now. And it is amazing. Also, it's good to know that just the perspective of someone who's coming into the game. So I wanted to do that for myself. And like one example is now when I watch tournaments, it's like, oh, okay, I can see that guy like tech that landing or like is wave dashing. Like I feel like I understand a pretty decent amount of the game now, not nearly like top player status or even like mid-tier player status, but enough to understand what I'm watching on the screen, at least in the sense of like there might be something that I don't know how they did that, but I know that they did a thing. I'm actually afraid that if I there will be a point where if I go too deep into it, that I will lose some of the outsider perspective. We will see how that goes. Because I think there's a lot of benefits from not being too in the scene, just in terms of like marketing and not being within a bubble, making sure that I like stay outside the bubble. But I'm probably going to push forward anyway because I want to, because I like melee. So we'll see how that goes. I was actually talking to JDMH about that the other day, about like getting too, like there are definitely downsides to being like too ingrained and engulfed by everything. So that is a fear of mine. But even if that happens, it would take me like a few years to get there. Like melee is so deep that I don't think that's a concern I'd have to have anytime soon.
Right. There are a lot of things happening, and I was sharing with you how even despite the fact that I'm doing a podcast and trying to get in the know, there are just many new things that I seem to learn on a daily basis. So you're right in saying that it'll take a little while, but even the same, you know more as each day progresses. And you said that you really like playing the game even after the first, I feel like a few months might go by and someone will say, oh, either I'm not doing this right and I need to figure out how to do it right, or they're just having a blast playing and they continue to just play and have fun and they're learning how to do things better and it's organic and that sort of thing. But then there's also the working mind or paralysis by analysis mind, where they go, okay, I've been playing for a few months, but I still kind of suck, or I suck a lot. So is this a good use of my time? I'm going to this and like that. I feel like, not to boil it down, but that's kind of the two camps that I see a newer player entering into. But if I'm understanding you correctly, it sounds like you're in the first camp where you're really having fun and you're finding new things to go, oh, wow, that's cool. Woo, I love melee. What would you actually describe yourself as, though?
Well, there are definitely two sides of it, which is one, I play mainly against one of my friends who is also pretty much at my skill level. So we're both beginners. And it's really interesting. It's a really unfair matchup. I play Sheik and he plays Ganon, but it's still,
wow.
Yeah. It's like the character advantage hasn't, like we haven't pushed the ceiling enough where the character advantage is insane. Like he was beating me for a few weeks in a row and now I'm beating him again. But I think melee is definitely in a place where it's harder to get that paralysis by analysis in a way, just because there are more obvious things to work on and see the improvement. Whereas in a game like League of Legends or even Valorant, it's really hard to see the actual physical improvement besides on the scoreboard. But even if I'm playing someone in melee and I'm getting my ass kicked, it's like I can also tell like, oh, my movement is a little bit better than it was before, or this like little thing that I learned is coming in handy there. And there's always those things that you can like physically see you get better at, whereas in other games I think it's a lot harder to see those small victories. And then there's also the aspect of I think it's kind of like Rocket League in that sense too. Like Rocket League, the other game that I mainly play is Rocket League, and that's a game where you can also like really physically see that you're getting better, opposed to just kind of recognizing you're getting better because your stats are getting higher. It's really like, okay, I'm actually able to control my character better, or I actually have this skill to learn. And I think that for me, I'm not at that point yet to run into the analysis by paralysis thing, because there are different things I can work on, where normally if I get analysis by paralysis, it's like, okay, like what should I be working on? Like, what about this? What about that? Where I'm not really in it to be a big competitor. I'm really here because I find it fun and I like learning the game. And so if I decided to be like a really big competitor, I think that might change. But at the moment, I'm really here just to like get better and improve at the game, and kind of like explore how the game evolves as I get better as well. And I think that's another thing that Melee and Rocket League both have going for it, is as you get better, the way that you view and the perspective that you have on the game changes and evolves with it, which is why I want to play, and also why I'm scared of going too deep, because I know that my perspective on the game is going to change as I get better at the game.
But you're not necessarily scared of saying, ugh, Marth and Fox are, it's 60-40 or whatever. You're scared of just you're not able to get a bird's eye view of the entire Melee sphere anymore. You're just too far in the weeds, if you will.
Exactly.
That is interesting that you're thinking to yourself, I want to go in, but I also am nervous about getting in too far, because it almost seems like you're on that spiral now. And I'm only saying that because you're finding value in going through that process, because it's not just about what's the perspective of someone who hears about Melee for the first time and what's that like, and thinking about that person is not going to have to hear about Melee once. They'll have to hear about it several times, many times probably, before they even get to the point of checking out a Melee video, and then they'll have to see more than one to, again, go further down the funnel, the literal funnel, the one that we've all been memeing about for about a month now. Mm-hmm. So are you just saying I can find things to think about and learn about and analyze for myself and go over in my own head of this part of the funnel now? Now I can think about what this is like, because I'm going through that, literally, I'm going through that experience for myself now.
Yes, but the main thing is that the way that I like to market things is I like to market things towards people who, like, my goal is for someone who isn't interested in the topic to get interested. Like, that is just my marketing style. And for instance, I got my 50-year-old manager at work who never watched anime or knew what it was to get like hooked on anime. I've done that with like literally 15 people, like people who would never like anime. I'd figure out a show that they would like. I'd be like, watch this. And then they got into anime. And these are people you'd never expect to watch anime. So I love getting people into the funnel in the first place. And I'm very aware of like a lot of different barriers that people can have to getting into funnels. And I'm a little not worried about that, just because I've been able to do that, like for anime or skateboarding. Well, I'm like very ingrained in those things, but I can still see the perspective of a newcomer. But as a newcomer now in Melee, there are definitely times where I'll see takes and it's very clear that this is good for a certain part of the funnel, but they're not taking into account like getting new players in, or like marketing towards growth, and not just like there. I'm very confident in the Melee community to be able to provide for the other parts of the funnel. but
they're struggling.
The gap is at the top.
And you can make an argument for each part of this funnel, if you will, being this is the most important part. It all sort of needs to support each other. But if you're focusing too far on one single part of it, then you're gonna lose the other thing. The rest of the funnel. So I think about how some people have different gifts. Yours, for example, is about how you can get someone who's not interested in something to become interested in it. I love that perspective. The thing is, though, from my own perspective, I like showing people new things, and I like to see them go from, oh, okay, and then 2 weeks later, they're like, this my jam. I'm like, okay, cool, that's awesome. But like, I don't think that I'm fueled by that as much as you are. So there's a difference between you and me. And then if you multiply that across an entire gaming community that is Melee, what I would hope to see are people who have interest in a certain part of the funnel, but what is probably the heart of that is that how many people are interested in interacting with the newbies and the people who are not actually into Melee yet. Because how are you supposed to talk about the doc if they don't know what the doc is? You're talking to someone who has been grown up on Fortnite or Minecraft or any of the other really, really popular games. I guess Valorant, Rocket League. You get it. Cross all games. And you could even try with someone who doesn't like video games, period. I have this experience when I talk to my coworkers about the fact that I have a podcast, and they're like, what's it about? Oh, it's about gaming. And they're like, oh, what games? And I'm like, oh, well, it's really about the one game that was made in 2001. Yeah, it's a really big community, I promise. It's so fun to it's fun to have those conversations. But I think that is what Melee does seem to struggle with the most. Are we really passionate about trying to get more people into the game? Are there people within Melee who are specifically focusing on the outsiders and converting them to becoming Melee disciples?
I mean, there are so many different ways you can do that without, I think, sacrificing the integrity of other things. For example, your podcast could be a good example in the sense of just people talking about how the game has affected them. Like, they might not be able to understand Smash, but they might be able to understand, like, hey, this is a really tight, like a really tight knit community. It emotionally helps me practice something and practice improving and getting better every day. It helps me meet people around the world that I never thought I would meet. It's really satisfying to try something over and over again and practice, and then finally it clicks. There's that, the wannabes, the whole like journey and like how Melee affects their normal lives. I think that's that's hard to explain where in the funnel that is. It depends on the podcast episode, I guess. But like, there are definitely things that you can do that you don't necessarily have to like just explain the game to people as much as explain what can people relate to about this hobby. Like, there might be, I'm assuming you don't skateboard, but I could probably tell you about me skateboarding, and you might not be like, oh, I want to skateboard, but you might be able to understand why that community is so unique and so like what it gives to me as a human being a part of that community or being a part of that culture. So I don't necessarily think it has to be like trying to get people interested or like wanting to play the game, as much as it is saying why we play the game, what it fulfills in us, either emotionally or intellectually. And that's going to be different for everybody, which is good because you're going to have a variety of responses for a variety of different personalities. And like, I think Walt's a really good example of that too. And it's something that we've worked on with his channel, which is really like, how can we make this a video that if you're really into the Melee community, you'll really appreciate it. But if you don't, if you've never heard about Melee, you'll still be interested in the story. And I think that's something that you don't necessarily have to put on as much kid gloves as you think you do. As long as, I mean, in some cases you can, but I don't think that's the only option. I think it's also how you talk about the game. What can you say that other people, they might not be able to relate to Melee, but there might be pieces of Melee that they can relate to in their own lives. Like, like Melee is a lot like skateboarding, just for reference, right? So there are tons of things where if I see something like in Melee, I just see a lot of parallels. So if I was going to try to get someone who skates into Melee, I have a lot of like things I could say that it's like, oh, that's like this, that's like that. And so I think it's just different, but I don't necessarily think that people should sacrifice the rest of the funnel as much as, there are worlds where you can satisfy multiple parts of the funnel at once without giving up the integrity of Melee. Like, obviously, if you're going to do tutorials and stuff like that, you might want to dumb it down, but there are parts of just explaining, hey, this is why this is awesome. I think that satisfies the entire funnel.
And that actually relates back to a video like Emperor Lemon's video. Emperor Lemon's video on Hungrybox, or the documentary. I'm referring to the Smash Brothers documentary in particular. So, and there's a countless other videos. Apex 2015. Walt did a fantastic job of making that. Like, for me, a person who was not there, I'm very interested in Melee, but I was very interested while watching the video. I was engaged, but I also saw how it sort of started from the ground up with establishing the scene, establishing the time, the context, and I thought this would be just another long line of videos that would be great to show to someone who's never seen Melee before. This would be a good video for them to watch. So you probably had a hand in that, at least somewhat, since you do partner up with Turn Down for Walt. So kudos to you as well for however you helped out with that particular video. That is probably a good segment into my question of how did you come to start working with a few of the content creators within Melee? How did that start? Because like you said, Melee kind of came in after the YouTube marketing thing. So why not something in Overwatch or in Rocket League?
Okay, well, Melee was definitely, I was learning. I felt like my knowledge base on YouTube marketing was pretty high at the time, because I was just interested in marketing. And also I did have my own YouTube channel when I was like 15. Call of Duty on the Wii commentaries. What up?
Nice.
But actually what ended up happening was I wanted to work for Evil Geniuses, for their League of Legends like thing. Well, it could have been for any part of their esports organizations, but I thought they had a really interesting brand where they had like the whole villain thing going on and that identity, and I thought there was really interesting ways they could leverage that. So I wanted to make a video resume. Basically, I saw a video from 100 Thieves, like their president was like, instead of giving a resume, just send an email or a response saying like, these are the problems you have, these are how I would solve them, etc., etc. So I wanted to make a video saying, hey, these are like basically giving out examples on things I thought they could do with their brand. And I hit up Walt, or Turned Down for Walt, to edit that for me. This was when he was at like 30K subs. Like, this is JV5. He had never done like any full documentary really era. So probably like a year and 3 months, last February. So a year and 3 or 4 months. I hit him up and I was like, hey, I will commission you. Can you edit this for me? because I also realized he was just a super sick editor, and I didn't have I wanted to look really professional. And he was like, sure. And he actually just said he would do it for free because it wouldn't be a ton of work for him. I was like, wow, I really hyped for that because I was very prepared to pay him for this. And then after he edited that video, there were parts of that video where he was like, hey, can you go more into this topic or that topic? Because this is something that I've been trying to work on. And then since that, I've been working with Walt. And a lot of it was just either titling stuff or how to position yourself. For Walt, it's a lot of different things, but I even used him as an example of that ability to explain something in a very complex way, but make it relatable to people who have never played the game. Because at that time, I saw one of his frame datas, and I wasn't into Melee like that. I saw the doc, but a few years ago, but that was it. And so when I saw, he showed me the complexity of the game in a way that I could understand it. And I didn't think that he realized he had that strength. So a lot of that was like either doubling down on that strength, some like title stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And then through him, I was basically like, hey, this is my first time getting any real experience. So I'm not going to charge you anything for this. You'll probably be the only person who I don't actually charge because I do want to transition this into a career. And then I started working with Walt, and things started really, really working out. And then he thought he liked what I was doing, and then he basically just recommended me out to other people. And since then, I started working with the wannabes, and there are individuals who I've helped more on a like individual basis. Like, I'm not going to charge you for this, but like, here are some things I think you could do. And then in the future, if this works out, maybe we could have like an official thing going on. So it was really Walt. He was also like the first person to like actually believed in me in that way, because I had a lot of self-doubt issues at the time. And so seeing some of the changes, like there are some specific things like taking frame data out of like frame data episode 5, like taking those numbers out of the titles and like immediately seeing better results. Like that really boosted my confidence. But also like Walt is like, not to geek out too much, but like Walt is actually just like a genuinely good friend. Like he definitely believed in me in situations when I had a lot of self-doubt. And even to this day, like if there's I'll pitch him an idea, and if he thinks it's bad, he'll tell me. But there are a lot of times where I'm like, I don't know about this. And he's like, no, this is good. We're using this. And like just behind the scenes, especially now that I've been like working with Walt for like a year and a half, like Walt is like, as good as he is as a content creator, he is probably he's an even better friend, like just as a human being. So a lot of that credit goes to Walt, just because like he has supported me a lot, like, and helped me more believe in myself in that regard.
It's those kind of friendships that just make you go, oh, that's really, really cool to hear. The best way that I can sort of summarize what you have been saying here is that you have that potential inside of you, and I relate to the self-doubting where it's like, am I actually good at something, or do I deserve to be here in the first place? Am I underqualified? All those kind of things. I do relate to that. And what's really cool is that because of the power of friendship, you were able to get enough of a confidence boost with the help of that person and, you know, other things as well. It's not like I'm picturing you with like, I don't know, a bunch of Walt emotes lifting you up. And that's not necessarily true. You did a lot of heavy lifting yourself. I want to give you credit, but hearing that support that you had, that's so cool. It really helps to just put it all together in my brain of A, how awesome Walt is, but also just like for hearing your story of going, there's different things that you've done in your life and maybe they're okay and for a job to pay the bills and such, but that you have a long-term goal of being able to help other people share their stories, share their passion for anything. It doesn't have to be specifically Melee, but I just love that Melee has been a really big part of that journey for you in how you have started to become more confident in, yes, I am good at this whole YouTube marketing thing, the things that I recommend more often than not, hit it out of the park, all that kind of stuff. It's really, really cool to hear, Ventus.
Well, I mean, it's definitely a part of it is like I always tell people I am like, if they're in League of Legends terms, I'm like blue buff, which if you don't play League of Legends, it's like if you're playing, you can get like a thing that basically boosts your stats. So I'll kind of like help people. I'll buff people, but like the content creators themselves are always the ones that are like carrying the production. And I always think that creative integrity is always first and foremost. So like, and then marketing to make whatever the creative integrity thing is, the creation interesting to other people is the secondary part. And so as far as Walt goes, I mean, I think it's somewhat of a two-way street. And I think in the terms of like, Walt will often be like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? What do you think about this? And I'll be like, yes, no. And I'll like explain my line of reasoning. So I think a lot of it is also, I really got lucky with personality types. Like we work really well together, like just the type of people we are. And then also working with the wannabes specifically, has been so helpful, like mental health wise, because we all have ADHD. And so Walt is kind of like, he's a hard worker. He's kind of like very fiery and consistent, whereas the wannabes, we literally all have ADHD. But that has actually been super fulfilling in the sense of like, I relate more to that style of motivation, and it's just been very like validating, a very validating experience, and like all of us bringing out the best of each other. So not also besides Walt, I really do want to give a big shout out to Will and JD, or Wasabi and JD, because like I think I've gotten really lucky with the people that I've worked with, honestly, because like both Walt and I have a very like, we're opposites in a lot of ways, but we're very like supportive. We can support each other in different areas, in the sense of like, Walt will be like, oh, is this good? Is that good? Like, what do you think about this? And I'll be like, yes, send it. Like you're overthinking this part. But I also get into those cycles too. And so Walt will often like, or I can send Walt 100 ideas and he'll be able to be like, all right, these 10 are golden and like these 90 are like, I'm not feeling it. With the wannabes, it's like, it's such a different dynamic, but it also like in an equally good way, where we all kind of have an idea of how we work, and like it's just very validating to work with the wannabes, because they're like, Jesse JD is super creative. He's like literally the antithesis, however you say it, antithesis of an entertainer. Like he is just like a natural born entertainer, and he's really good at that, and he can have fun with it. and he has all these creative ideas, and he understands marketing from like an entertainment idea like perspective. And Will also goes on those like creative routes, but he goes more from it on a like educational creative route perspective. And like just we all kind of like go through these cycles of diving into these holes. And it's like, honestly, really, it's the people that I've been lucky enough to work around, and so far I've not been disappointed by the Melee community. So maybe that's also Junebug. Shout out to him. I haven't really worked a lot with him personally. I've talked to him, but he is also just like such a nice guy. Like there are so many people who I could shout out that are just like super supportive. Also Sam from Golden Guardians, shout out to him. Yeah, now I'm just giving shout outs, but I feel like it's important to me because it's not just like me against the world. And I'm really lucky to be able to work on like all these completely different projects, but like are also like all equally entertaining and important, have their own different voices. And I think that's what's honestly fun about doing the work that I do, is like being able to work on all these projects that are so different but so similar to each other.
I loved hearing all the shout outs that you were giving. There's no shame in it. And I wanted to just take an extra second to, and when I get to talk about how much I love the Wannabes podcast, and listening to JD and Wasabi talking about life and how Melee fits into that, and the mentality stuff, the emotions. They are so willing to be honest with each other and be honest with the listeners. And as a loyal listener of the Wannabes pod since January, it's been so much fun to be on the journey with them, because I can just hear that development as these weeks go by, and hearing the stories, how the weeks have been going for them individually and together as a podcasting duo, co-hosts of the Wannabes. JD and Wasabi are super cool. And there's not really a whole lot left that I wanted to ask you about. If I think of something between now and the time that we wrap up, I'll squeeze it in. But aside from the shout-outs that you've already made, I would love it if you would offer any closing thoughts that you have, as well as telling the people where they can find you.
Okay, so closing thoughts. Go check out the Wannabes podcast. I'm going to market it here. It's really good. I really want to get that more viewers. Like it's really important, because it is such a unique story. If you haven't listened to the Wannabes podcast, it's literally about Will and JD. They're very real with each other, just authentic, and kind of their journey to trying to become like really good at Melee and also figure out life. And there's a lot of different arcs in that. Like Will just got a job, but he lost his job earlier this year, and then he got it and then got laid off. And then that also gave him time to practice Melee and grind and switching to box. And then Jesse he like really came to his own, like figuring out that he was diagnosed with ADHD. And you kind of like see these like actual like real life hurdles that I think a lot of people deal with in their life, but people don't like talk about. And they're just so open with each other, and they're very similar and opposite at the same time. So it's just it's so underrated. It is such an underrated podcast. So please go check out the Wannabes. Also go check out Turn Down for Walt merch. The friend who helped make VentusOfficial, our clothing brand, he was the one who helped with the designs. Other Walt, they're both engineers, so it can be confusing. But he helped out a lot with the design, so it was nice like to bring him in the fold. So please go check out the merch for Turn Down for Walt. Like also, if you guys don't know, Walt literally has a full-time job, and he's cranking out these documentaries and like this high quality content all the time. It's not like he's like just doing this. He's literally balancing this off of a full-time job and doing it for fun, and for the community. And so if you guys want to support, please check out his, please check out the merch. There should be new stuff coming soon. And there's also a Patreon. And also shout out to you for this podcast. It's been super interesting following along, like how things are going. And you definitely have the very consistent picking up guests who all kinds. I'm pretty certain you're just going to like get the entire Melee scene at one time. And I could go into detail on some of the marketing strategy that I think you're pulling off that I think is super effective, whether you know it or not. But I think this podcast has also just been really filling a niche that hasn't existed in all the different podcasts. Also, shout out to JDMH because he's super cool, and I think a lot of his marketing takes are on point.
Yes, and JDMH, friend of the program, we got to talk about some marketing stuff in an earlier episode. So if you just look up JDMH and Cypher003 or Bottom of the Smash Mountain, you will find it. Don't worry. And I wanted to thank you for coming on again, Ventus, because you have a lot of things that you have going on yourself. You're not just sitting at home trying to figure out, okay, who can I be working with and helping them grow while also helping myself out in the paying the bills category. You work as well, the outside of the realm of what you want to be doing kind of job. So wanted to give you a shout out to say you are working as hard as you can to make everything work, make the dream work as well. It's really cool to see that there's more than one way to succeed in the context of video games or YouTube and that kind of thing. It may not be where you have to be camera facing and be the voice of something or the face of something. You can just be someone that helps them along the way. And it's been really interesting to me to be able to talk to people who are facilitating Melee events to happen, like TOs, people who are less known across the entire community, but are very important in their local scene, where it all eventually creates a beautiful picture, the entire canvas of Melee. Everybody has a really important part of that. And even if you say to yourself, I want to try to be semi outside of the Melee community in some ways, not in all ways, but in some ways, that is true. But your stamp, your contribution to that canvas is still very important, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with you, the people that you work with, and where you go next. Very excited, Ventus. So once again, thank you for coming on to Bottom of the Smash Mountain.
Oh, actually, can I have one last closing thought?
No, absolutely not. No, I'm kidding. Yes, please take it away.
So this is something that I've realized in case there are people who want to create content or marketing. After I did get over my hurdle of self-doubt, I kind of came to the realization that it's not that I really know I know everything. I just kind of came to the realization that nobody really does know what they're doing. And there's so much that is not known than is known, at least in terms of like the content and YouTube space. And so I think that it might be important for people to know, like, it's not that once you get over the imposter syndrome, it really isn't like, oh my gosh, I know everything. It's really that you just realize that everybody else is winging it, and like you might be a bit ahead. Like, not to sound too cocky, but there are definitely like things where I'm very confident in certain areas, and I would see other people and I'd be like, but am I like super sure about this, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, yeah, you don't know everything. And you can learn from everybody. There'll be people who I still learn from, even though I'm really confident now in what I do. I'm still learning from like all these different types of people. I just think that, no one actually really knows what they're doing. It's kind of like going into adulthood. You just realize that everybody is winging it to some extent and just being comfortable in that state.
Tell him, Ventus. Tell him. Oh, that was awesome. That was so cool. Yeah, I basically am ahead of the curve. You're like the Joker from The Dark Knight. Now, of course, hopefully you're not murdering innocent people or anything, but that's what that reminded me of just now, I have to say. And that's a fantastic movie. Now I want to go watch that. Oh, no. I can't watch it for the millionth time. I can't do it. Not until the end of the year. When I really like a movie, I try to force myself to only watch it once a year. Otherwise, I'm in danger of watching it multiple times. Okay. I think that's all I got. But Ventus, thank you so much for coming on.
Anytime. It was fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Bottom of the Smash Mountain. Before you get going, please like the video. Where are you going? You left. Well, for those of you who are still here, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment your favorite part of the interview. Hey, is there a timestamps person that wants to post them? Because for now, the only thing that I'm doing for timestamps is the start of the interview and the end of the interview. You're welcome, YouTube. I couldn't be bothered. At least for now, I couldn't be bothered. So if you also want to listen to this podcast in its entirety, I have exclusive podcast audio that is separate from the audio that I post here onto YouTube. So if that's something that's interesting to you, you can check out Bottom of the Smash Mountain on your favorite podcasting platform. Seriously. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all kinds of podcasts. So thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.